this episode of Martial Truth, my interview with Scott Fawcett Sensei. Scott Fawcett has just written this book on Isshin-Ryu. Let me get in the camera correctly here. Isshin-Ryu Karate, The Dragon Man and His One Heart Way by Scott K. Fawcett. Highly recommend. You can get it on Amazon. I'll obviously put a link to it in the description. Scott's a longtime student of Isshin-Ryu, trained with originally Dale Jenkins, and then trained with Advincula. Has been a student of Advincula Sensei for a long, long time. Advincula Sensei, one of the powerhouses of Isshin-Ryu Karate, long fabled history, fantastic martial artist. So Scott's written a book. I highly recommend it. As I'll tell him in the interview, I don't agree with everything in it, but it's a great book. It's got a lot of really good stuff on it. If you're doing Isshin-Ryu, definitely think it should be in your library. Okay. Just for a few different things that are in there. The kumite techniques, the self-defense techniques Tatsu used to teach, the Bosai used to teach, just a lot of things. There's a lot. He covers a lot of ground. It really shows you how deep and varied the training is in Isshin-Ryu. So highly recommend. So hope you like it. Please, with this close to 15,000 subscribers. So if you like the videos I put up, if you enjoy the podcast, please please subscribe, consider becoming a monthly member. Again, that helps me to do things. I will be going to Okinawa in a week. I leave very soon, a couple of days after this podcast drops. So I'll be out of touch for 10 days, hopefully shooting some video while I'm there, hopefully doing some other stuff while I'm there, have some good things to talk about when I get back. All right. So there probably won't be as many videos dropping for that time. But as soon as I get back, we'll get right back at it and get videos up again. All right. So also, I'll put in again the links to my seminars in New York, all right, which are coming up the end of January. Sensei Jimmy Waller, who's my student who took over the school there, he put up a Facebook event page. So I'll put the link to that. Gives you an idea of what I'm teaching and when I'm teaching it, okay? We've already got some people flying in from different states to attend, so it'd be great if you can come. Especially if you're a fan of the channel and you want this opportunity to meet me and train, be great. Would love to meet people. Love. All right. We'll have a great time at the seminar. All right. So consider that. So please, hope you enjoy the interview. Here's my interview with Scott Fawcett.
And Jonathan Exars, they had him out for seminars. I liked what I saw. He used Miyazuke. First lesson I was doing was Seisan. I didn't turn around enough to see with both eyes. He smacked me in the head pretty hard, said, "You'll never make that mistake again." and I just loved what I saw. So I asked Claudia, actually, how do I ask him to become his student? And she said, "I don't know, just ask him." So I did. He said, "Send me your karate resume and I'll take a look at it." So I did and became his student. And I've been Sensei Advincula student now for about 20-ish years.
So it's interesting. I started in 79 also. And similar, right? Out of violence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some problems in the neighborhood I was in. I wasn't a guy that hung out with a lot of people, so I kind of was only had a small circle of friends, and I felt I had to learn to defend myself, and I did. And I walked into a school that just happened to teach Isshin-Ryu, and it was at the local YMCA. The guy that I trained with there gave me a good basic Isshin-Ryu, but he also wasn't what he claimed to be. He claimed to be a direct student of Tatsuo, and he wasn't, right? And again, back then you could claim that kind of stuff because there was no internet and there was no people getting on planes flying to Okinawa. Once that started happening, anybody that claimed that stuff, they kind of got exposed, right? But what happened to me was I eventually left him because I just didn't like the way he was. He was kind of just wasn't, his character wasn't what I was looking for. And I went to Okinawa, and when I went to Okinawa, Master Shimabuku said to me, he says, you should train with everybody in Isshin-Ryu that you think is senior to you or knows more than you, and you should take the best from each one and make your own strong Isshin-Ryu. So when Kichiro Shimabuku told me that, like, no teacher had ever said that. Like the previous teacher I had, he was like, you should only train with me. I can teach you everything you need to know. And here's the headmaster of Isshin-Ryu telling me, listen, go out. And he even pointed to himself. He says, Michael, you're here training with me. If there's things I do you like, do that. If there's things I do you don't like, well, then don't do those. So when I got back, the first guy I called was Bill Dissel, and he didn't want to come in for a seminar. Okay. He didn't want to come in. Right. He said, because he knew my first teacher, and he said, I didn't want that guy talking negatively about me. I said, okay. And then I had already started to attend seminars with Advincula sensei. So I'd attended a bunch of them at Phil Barry's place. This is before Claudia and them were bringing them in.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this is before them. Um, and then George, the guy out on Long Island,
Trim,
George
George
Trim,
Trim.
George
Yeah.
Trim, he had him out. I went out there. And then when I got back from Okinawa, when Dissel turned me down, I said, okay, I called Advincula. I said, hey, Sensei, I'd like you to come in for a seminar. And I had him come into New York several times. And then, I continued to go into other people. And then twice I went out flew out to San Diego. One time when Tokamura was there, one time when Weishi was there, and obviously Van Gilson was there, and all those different guys, Safried, all those guys. So
Yeah.
and then one time I went out to San Diego for a Kobudo seminar with my Kobudo sensei, Gakiya Yoshiaki. And the one night, one of the three Kobudo masters came in, taught Wichiru. And me and my guys from New York were like, well, we don't do Wichiro. So I said to my guys, I says, hey, why don't I call Advinko? Let's take him and Michi out for dinner. And that's what I did. I called him. I said, say, hey, Sensei, why don't we go out to dinner? So we stopped at the house. Of course, he takes out the original Megami patch. My guys are having heart attacks. We're talking about things. My guys are like, oh my God, right? You know, and then we went out to dinner, So, again, I know Winkler pretty well. I have a lot of respect for him. We don't agree on everything, but again, put two martial artists in a room, and if they agree with everything, there's probably something wrong. Um,
Mhm.
but I think he's one of the powerhouses in Isshin-Ryu. I have the utmost respect for the guy. So yeah, so it's interesting. So I have spent a lot of time with him. I have done a lot of training with him, and there are things he taught me that I'm still doing to this day in the dojo. So it's just interesting, the effect he's had on Isshin-Ryu, and look, he's a guy, he's 86 and he's still doing it.
Amazing.
Well,
He's a
it's
great
like,
role model that we can do this into our later years.
yeah, it's like Kichiro Shimabuku. I mean, Kichiro Shimabuku sent me a video a year and a half ago of him doing all the Isshin-Ryu kata, one right after the other. Now,
And he's about 86 also, right?
he's
Now.
a little younger than that. I think I
Okay.
think he's I think he's 84, 85. I'm not
Okay.
100% sure. Look, I'll be seeing him in 2 weeks. I leave in 2 weeks for Okinawa.
Oh, do
So,
you?
oh
Great.
yeah, yeah. He asked me a few months ago. I received a letter right after I got promoted. He sent me a letter and said to me,
Congratulations, by the way.
"Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, again, like I'm still trying to figure out what it all means, right? Like I gotta I one of the things I jokingly say is I have a lot more friends in Isshinru now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah. But anyway, um, but no, so I'm going to see him. We'll see what happens. But it's interesting because of that advice he gave me, and I had trained with Advincula and I sought out Advincula. And I said to Advincula when he was in the car going from the airport, I said to him, I said, hey Sensei, I just want to let you know, um, you're not here to promote me. Don't ever promote me. I can't accept a promotion from you. I'm here to just get as much knowledge from you as possible. And And he said, fine, Mike. And he never did promote me, which was good because, I didn't need it from him. I was getting my promotions from Master Shimabuku. But, and that also led me to train with a lot of the other first generation guys. So I've trained with a lot of the first generation guys. And look, some of them I had a cup of coffee with.
Mhm.
Other guys, more, more physical stuff, different things. So yeah, so he's one of, when I put my Mount Rushmore of Isshinryu together, he's one of the guys on the mountain, right? Him, Sherman Harrell. My Mount Rushmore might be a little bigger than the four, right?
Oh.
But again, I think he's done Isshinryu a tremendous service. So I like the guy. I know he doesn't agree with some of my fighting applications and stuff with that. I don't care. But again, I have the utmost respect for the guy. And even in my classes to this day, when I'm teaching something like the Bobo Kamite and the Bosai Kamite you have in your book, right? So he taught me that, right? And I liked it. I did the Bobo that you see Angi Weizu do, and that the
Yeah, there was a
Marines
couple
developed.
versions.
Yeah, so I do that one too. And the funny thing is, I'm mentioning this to you because again, you're writing books, and you want to know this stuff. When I asked Kichido Shimabuku in 1991. I said, what about the Bobo Kumite, the Bosai Kumite? I said, the one that we see everybody do. And his response was, yeah, that's good. Yes. And then he said to change it.
Mhm.
I was like, change it? Wait a second. What do you mean change it? We're not allowed to change anything. Oh my God, if we change something, right? And he says, no, change the techniques, do different stuff. So it was interesting when I learned the Bobo from Advincula. On the one time Sherman Harold came into the dojo to teach, I had him come in a bunch of times to teach seminars. I showed him that Bobo. And
Mhm.
Sherman Harold said to me, he says, I remember Tatsuo teaching that, but I forgot it, Mike. And Sherman Harold said, could you film that and send it to me? And we did. So again, it's interesting when you train with the different guys, you can kind of begin to piece the different puzzle together, you know,
Yep.
which I think is great. So let's talk about the book and let's talk about why the book and what
Okay.
made you write the book. Okay.
Sure.
So fill us in.
So, well, I guess the first part of it was I'm not someone who's naturally gifted at writing to begin with. I'm an engineer by degree.
Okay.
And people basically categorize engineers as people who can do math but can't put a sentence together. And it's not far from the truth with most of us. But I felt compelled because I felt like even though I have so much more to learn in my journey on Isshin-Ryu, I felt like I had accumulated knowledge and I started thinking about things. I'm 57 now. I hope to be doing this like Sensei Vincula 30 years from now when I'm
Yeah.
87. But we don't know what tomorrow brings. And I started thinking, we all do this. We all accumulate knowledge and we learn and we grow in our martial arts. And the goal is to better ourselves and understand ourselves, but also to pass what we learn on to the next generation. And I said to myself, this seems like a really good time to do that. I have the energy to do it now. I have the desire to do it now. And I really wanted to start by writing a children's book. That's really where I started. I said, I want to get something that young kids, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, like maybe kids into like the tween years could enjoy and learn a little bit about Isshin-Ryu. And then I started writing and putting words on paper and putting ideas. And these things just take to kind of like snowball and they take a life of their own. And little by little, I started writing this and saying, this is no longer a children's book. And the problem I had is like you could write on Isshin-Ryu forever. Where do you stop the scope and the depth of the book? And it wasn't meant to be a complete I don't consider myself like a historian like my teacher,
Yeah.
but I love the history and I love the
Right.
tradition. And I love the philosophy around Isshin-Ryu, and all the aspects. I mean, everything together is what makes Isshin-Ryu what it is. The history, the philosophy, and it just
So here's the book.
took a life of its own.
Here's
Yeah.
the
So
book. So let me tell you what I like about the book. So what I like a lot about the book is you cover a wide scope of Isshin-Ryu, meaning it's not just the kata, and you just talk about each kata. There's not photos, step-by-step photos of the kata. Frankly, we have enough of that. And plus with video now, do we really need that necessarily in a book anymore? Probably not, right? But what I like is you cover all the different aspects of Isshin-Ryu, whether it be the Kihon, right? Koteki Tai, all the different Hojo Undo, the different types of exercises, the Makiwara, the different types of sparring in Kumite, the bunkai. I mean, the secret scrolls, right? The 25 self-defense techniques that Tatsuo, and you have in photos, which are great. You have the Bobo and the Bosai that Tatsuo taught, the basic one, that a lot of Isshin-Ryu practitioners frankly are not familiar with. Um, so that's one of the reasons I like the book, along with a detailed description of Megami, details on the Kempo Gokui, right? The so-called codes of Isshin-Ryu, right? So the book has a lot of info, and it's like you said, it's not you can't. There's never going to be a book that's going to cover any style. Like you can't. It's totally impossible. Like for instance, me, like I think it's great. You've got the secret scrolls in there. I like to call them that because it just sounds funny, right? The secret scrolls, the 25 techniques, right? Why am I glad you have them in there? Well, because within those 25 techniques, Tatsuo Sensei had a brief ground fighting curriculum, and he also had knife defense, right? So when I interviewed Joe Swift on this podcast, one of my problems with modern Okinawan karate is I think it's lost its way. And, I blame Okinawa for this. And that way is it's lost its original intent, which is self-defense. That's what it's created for. So I think when you try to change something's nature, you change it in a way that may not necessarily be for the best when you try to change it into a sport, so to speak. So when I interviewed Joe Swift, I said to him, I said, Joe, when's the last time you saw an Okinawan or Japanese karate master do ground fighting? And his response was never, right? And I said, when's the last time you saw them do knife defense? And he said, never. And I said, well, we know Tatsuo had this as part of his curriculum. So why isn't anybody else doing this anymore? Well, because it's become about a sport, right? And you don't need ground fighting when all you're doing is sport sparring. You don't need ground fighting when all you're doing is you don't need a ground fighting when all you're doing is sport sparring. You don't need knife defense when all you're doing is sport fighting. And I understand Okinawa is safe, but it's interesting that a lot of the Americans and the Westerners, I want to include the Europeans in that, take the self-defense aspect more serious. So, like for me, I want people to buy this book because I want them to see just how well rounded the full spectrum of Isshin-Ryu is. Because I see a lot of Isshin-Ryu dojo, and I'm sure you'll agree, where they do kata and they do sparring.
Mhm.
Kata, sparring. Kata, sparring. Okay. And then you say, okay, can you show me how that move in kata could be used in a fight? And they just give you a look. Or they show you this such basic thing that would never work in a real situation. Um, and so that's one of the things I like about it is you're showing the depth, the depth of Isshin-Ryu. So that's why I highly recommend it. If you're doing Isshin-Ryu, I think it's something you want to add to your Isshin-Ryu library. There's a couple of Isshin-Ryu books out there. Years ago, I was asked to review one of them, and I was so disappointed in it when I read it that I wouldn't do a review
Mhm.
because I just didn't want to. I just didn't want to zing it. I mean, the guy had misspellings of first generation people's names. And I was like, okay, I can't review this book because it's just not, it's going to make me be harsh and I don't want to do that. So really like if I review a book on here, I pretty much, it's a book that I like. I don't review books I don't like. If I don't like it, I just don't review it. I don't
I
say anything
appreciate
about it.
it.
Well, no, that's true. I mean, because it doesn't, again, I don't want to be sitting here and just be critical and rip things apart. Like I said, I told you, do I agree with everything in your book? No. Does it matter? No. I mean, that's one of the things I think people get a little too crazy with, right? Um, my Isshin-Ryu is a conglomerate of a lot of different instructors. So it's not just, there's some people that had more of an influence on me than others, but it's a conglomerate. I don't believe any one senior teacher in Isshin-Ryu has all the answers. I just don't. And again, having trained with a lot of the first generation guys, they were all a little different. There's
Yeah.
certain things that you can tell when you see them, when you see a real first generation guy do kata, you can tell he's a first generation guy. Like they all have a certain look. And then when another guy will claim to be a first generation guy and I'll see him do kata and I'll be like, no, that guy, there's no way that guy. He does not look like Mitchum. He doesn't look like Advincula. He doesn't look like Harold. you know. I was at a seminar with Mitchum and Harold where a guy was claiming to be a first generation student, and Harold turned to Sensei Mitchum and said, "That guy doesn't look like Sensei. He doesn't look like Soke. Like he doesn't look like us, right? He didn't study with Soke." And it turned out he was right. Right. The guy didn't study with him. So you should still write the
I,
children's book. Now
I, I hope
that should
so.
be book number two.
Well, I have so many ideas in my head now for other things. It took me 4 years to write this book.
Oh, I'm
I have a
sure.
full-time job. I have a dojo that I run. So there's a lot of things going on. I have other ideas.
Do you have a
I
storefront
also,
dojo or you just like renting space? Like a couple of
so
nights a
I
week or
rent the
something?
space. It's
Okay.
my dojo. I have about 40 students. I
Okay.
rent a space, strip mall, and I have classes Monday through Thursday and Saturday mornings.
Okay.
And I have a few other people that teach for me sometimes
Okay, cool.
once a week. But I do it because I love it. It's never
Right.
really made money, but I
Yeah.
love doing it, and it's my passion, and it gives me wonderful people to train with,
Well,
and to teach.
it was the same for me. I mean, I was a police officer for 22 years and my wife's a doctor, right? So we both had good jobs. I had a storefront in New York. I don't have to tell you how expensive. You're in Jersey. It's the same crap. It's ridiculously
Yep.
expensive, right? And then, so was my dojo, was it making money? Yes. Was it making money that I could pay my bills at home? No. Like, no. All right. And my student who took it over, I mean, he's still running it and keeps it open. And again, same thing. Like he's retired. He's, financially he's secure. So he said as long as it pays his bills, he's happy because again, he's got a place to go down and train. He likes to teach. So, I tell people, and now out here in Arizona, I have a building. I had a
Mhm.
building built. It's in my backyard because I have an acre and a quarter. So my
Okay.
dojo's in the corner of my property. And I walk 200 yards from my back porch and I walk in my dojo. It's the greatest thing in the world, right?
Beautiful.
And I have classes. I teach classes during the week.
Mhm.
I don't have a lot of students. I'm pretty rural where I am, a little rural, but I don't care that I don't have a lot of students. What I get
Mhm.
now is I got a lot of people that fly in. We have a set day rate. They fly in, they stay with us at the house. We provide meals.
Mhm.
I pick them up at the airport, and they may stay for 5 days, and we train all day long. Whatever one of the arts that I teach that they want to
Fantastic.
learn or do. So we get that a lot. So
Yep.
so four
And
years it
that's
took.
what I've done a lot. Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I've done a lot with Sensei over the years is go out and see him a couple times a year.
yeah,
And and for many of the early years stayed with him. Then when Mitchie got a little older and he and
yeah,
Mitchie got older, didn't stay at the house anymore, stayed
yeah,
at a hotel, easier on them. But it was some of the best memories I have are being out in that outdoor Megami dojo with Sensei, training all day long for 3, 4 days straight, taking a break at lunchtime and eating some of Mitchie's famous soba or famous fried rice.
yeah,
And even if we're sitting at the table, Sensei's always teaching. He's
yeah,
always telling.
yeah,
He's not just drinking a beer and shooting the shit with you.
yeah. No, no,
He's
yeah, yeah.
he's
Listen,
drinking a beer and he's oh, there's always a lesson.
I agree 100%. And you
And one of the
mentioned it. You
lessons
mentioned a
from
story where he tried to hit you in the head when you didn't look first and say
yeah.
something. So one of the first times I was working with him, he was going over Koteki Tai, and he was doing it with me, right? And as he came over, he went to punch me in the face, right? And I came across, and he goes, "Good, Calandra." He says, "Good, you're paying attention." I said, "Well, you think I'm going to let you punch me in the face? That's going to hurt. I'm not going to let you punch me in the face." And we both had a good laugh about it. But that's
Yeah.
one of the things that attracted me to him is that he's pretty hardcore.
Mhm.
He
He
takes
is.
it he takes it serious. Which I liked, and also the fact that he did other things. He did the Kobudo, he did the Eskrima, he did the knife fighting, you know, so again, that attracted me. So, we did a little knife fighting with him. I think if we did maybe a little bit of a scream, if we did, it was like nothing, right? We did a little bit more knife fighting with him. Um, but he's the one that, so, I do Mariyoshi Kobudo
Mhm.
and I'm pretty senior in that too. And but he's the one that taught me Chon no Kun and Sakagawa no Kun. So I first learned it from Advincula Sensei, and I kept
Okay.
practicing it. Like I learned it and practiced it, right? And I think he taught it maybe at like one of Phil Barry's seminars because when he came in by me, we were pretty much doing mostly Isshin-Ryu, but
Yeah.
but then so yeah, so when I learned those in Mariyoshi, I already had them, but I just had to tweak them a
Yeah.
little bit to do them the way that
Everybody puts their own fingerprint
yeah,
on. And
so
Sensei,
good.
I was going to say, Sensei Vincula, after Master Shimabuku passed away, his sensei's, Michi's sister's husband, so his brother-in-law by marriage, Hiroshi Ikimaya, he was best friends growing up with Iha Kotaro
Right.
Sensei, who is the president of Rukan Kai.
Right.
And right after, shortly after Master Shimabuku passed away, um, Hiroshi said, "Would you like me to introduce you to my good friend Iha Kotaro Sensei? And would you be interested in studying Kobudo with him?" Sensei said, "Damn right, I would."
Yeah.
And then he studied there, and that's where he was first introduced to Chon no Kun, Sakagawa, and,
And I
and
think
some of
I
the
think did Kotaro study with Mariyoshi?
uh
Yeah,
he
Kotaro.
he studied with many different people.
Yeah, because
So
because some of the kata are very similar to the Mariyoshi.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
So he started with Chibana Chosen
Right.
in Shorin-ryu,
Right.
and then he Yochoku, and then because he was very small, even for an Okinawan,
Right.
he realized Kobudo was something that would give him a little bit more of a level playing field against a larger person.
Right.
He fell in love with the bow, and he seeked out many different people who he learned different kata from over the years and
Right.
formed Rukan Kai. And he and Avincula Sensei are very close. They have a great respect for each other. And one of Sensei Vincula's things is he runs, as you know, these cultural martial arts tours. He's been
Right.
doing them since the 90s. And he always says it's a cultural martial arts tour. The word culture comes first because when he takes us, He wants us to, he says, yes, we're going to go to the dojo. We're going to kick, punch, block. We're going to do Kobudo. But the primary thing I want you to leave with is an understanding and appreciation for Okinawan culture, customs, tradition, and history. And he said that was one of Master Shimabuku's. There's that famous quote of Master Shimabuku where he said, I really wish that Americans through karate would understand my culture. And Sensei Advincula took that to heart, and he emphasizes two things. One is learn Okinawan culture, because culture and karate they're so intertwined that you really can't pull them apart. And the second piece of that is he says, please continue. He and Iha Kotaro Sensei are getting older, and Tokumura Sensei and all these senior guys. And he says, I want to make sure the relationship continues. So now we have a relationship with Mitsutada Sensei, Iha Sensei's
Yeah.
son,
Yeah.
and others on Okinawa. And my son now has been there, and he's made friends with some of the
Right.
kids his age in the dojo. So the important thing is that we keep those ties with Okinawa and don't lose those over time. And I think that's important to my teacher. And I just came back from my 17th trip to Okinawa. I love the place. I love the people. I love the culture.
Right.
And as long as I can afford it and have the time and I'm in good health, I hope to do it for another, like I said, 20 or 30 years.
Well, I agree with you on the cultural thing because even like watching people interact with Kichiro Shimabuku Sensei, they don't get it. Like there's certain things they don't understand about the Okinawan culture. And and I try to explain it to them. Like I'll give you for instance. So I hosted the World Championships in 2019 in Europe. So
Mhm.
Master Shimabuku came in, and he knows my wife since 1994. So he knows my wife a long time. And he sits on a dais the day of the tournament, the day of the actual competition. Now I don't like the tournament. I don't like it, but
Mhm.
he likes it, so I go every 2 years. And again, like I tell people, if you do want to do karate as a sport and that makes you happy, God bless you. Like if that makes you happy, then do it. Do that because it makes you happy. But anyway, I hosted it because my student in London likes sport karate. So his Isshin-Ryu was
Mhm.
a little bit more sportier, and he wanted to host the tournament. But Master Shimabuku told him, you can only host the tournament if Mike puts his name on it because nobody knows you. So it's got to be Mike. And I told him, I said, listen, if you don't want to, he goes, no, let's do that. We'll get more people. And we had almost 600 competitors. And
Wow.
Isshin-Ryu's grown tremendously in Europe. My student has like 9 schools in London. He has a bunch of schools in India. He has some schools in Sri Lanka. Lars Anderson has done a great job with helping Isshin-Ryu grow.
Yeah.
Isshin-Ryu's grown a lot in Europe. So I like to think I had a little bit of a part in that. But again, guys like Lars Anderson, the other people have all contributed to that, including my student Ramathas in London. But it's great to see that it's growing. But the thing was funny was Master Shimabuku said to me, can you ask Lisa to sit with me on the dais? Right. I said, sure. So I said, Lisa, he wants you to sit with him. So she went up and sat with him and he turned to her and he said, people are going to come up all day long and they're going to want to take photos with me. They're going to want this. They're going to want that. I can't tell them no. You have to tell them no for me. And that's one of the things that a lot of the foreigners don't understand about the Okinawans, right? So when you ask them something and they just kind of smile at you, they're not saying yes because they feel they can't say no, right?
They're very polite. It's
Right.
the island of courtesy.
Right. So the issue is so my wife, my wife basically was the bad guy, and my wife was like, no problem. So she would basically tell people, no, no, you can't take a picture with the master now. The tournament's going on or whatever. And but it's just interesting that some people will look at that and say, oh, he's being difficult. He's being this. But again, unless you've been through what that person's been through and understand what that person's been through, you don't know why the reason is. Like I know the reason because he had a million guys show up at the dojo when his father was alive, and they took a picture with him, and then they hung it up in their dojos in the States and said they trained with Tatsuo Shimabuku. And meanwhile, all they did was get a picture with him. So,
Yeah.
so like he has actual signs up in the dojo that says no photos allowed.
Wow.
But when I go, we take photos with him. We take photos all over the dojo because he knows I'm not one of those guys. Like so, it's just for the guys that show up. We had a guy show up in 1997. Advincula was on the island then, because Advincula was very complimentary of me and the other students from Kichido Sensei's dojo doing Sun Tzu. He came up to me, he says, Calandra, you guys look great. I said, what? Kichiro's guys look great. And you'll know this is Advincula because I call it like I see it. You guys look great. I said, thanks, Sensei. Appreciate it. Right. But we had a guy show up and he, we're having class and we're training and he wants to take pictures. And it's like, no, we're working out. You want to work out, you work out. Maybe Master Shimbook will take some pictures at the end, but he didn't take pictures at the end. And and the guy left a little befuddled, and he's probably went back and said, yeah, he wouldn't take any pictures. I went all the way there. Okay, well, so what's your motivation? So again, I totally get the cultural thing. And it's interesting that Advincula went to Kotaro Sensei, right? To study Kobudo, right? Bartasevitz went to Demura Sensei, study Kobudo, right? Even me, I went to Gakia Sensei to study Kobudo, right? So one of the things, and I've said this on other podcasts, is I think the Kobudo, as most Isshin-Ryu people are practicing it, is pretty weak. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's almost like treated like the bastard stepchild of Isshin-Ryu. Like everybody puts so much emphasis on the empty hand. Oh, that Kobudo stuff's just some extra stuff we do for fun. But they don't really, a lot of the dojo don't take it as serious and realizing how important part of the system it actually is. And if you look at it, and I'll see what you think of this, we're the first style to have a lot of Kobudo along with the karate. So it's the first
most
real
dojo are
style.
showing where most of it is just empty hand.
Right. So it's the first style where Tatsuo, again, who I think was a genius, right, says, well, I'm going to bring this Kobudo stuff into my art. And what does he do? So obviously we have the one kata from Kion, right? If you want to look at Kion no Sai and say, okay, maybe that's from him. And then the other kata from Taira Shinken, and obviously Kusan Kusai that Tatsuo created. And it just goes to show you, I mean, there's a lot of Kobudo. And like, for my students that do Mariyoshi Kobudo and start at the same time as Isshin-Ryu, obviously the first night in Mariyoshi, you're doing Bo. When they get to Bo and get to Tokumine and Isshin-Ryu, when they start learning Tokumine, it's always the same response. Wow, this kata's hard. Like this,
I feel like a white belt all over again.
Yeah. And I tell them, I said, yeah, see, this is the thing. Like the Isshin-Ryu Bo kata are no joke. They're no joke. All three of them are ridiculously hard. And Shishino-kun, the third one, oh my God, it's the hardest Bo kata there is. I mean, it just is, it's ridiculously hard. So, again, I think it's something that's needs to be paid more attention to. And like a lot of the other things you talk about, like simple things like Koteki Tai and some of the supplementary exercises. How many Isshin-Ryu dojo is still doing Koteki Tai? I don't know.
So important.
Yeah, yeah. And like I do other arts, like Chen style Tai Chi has body conditioning. And people go, Tai Chi? Tai Chi has body conditioning? Isn't that the slow stuff you do in the park? Yeah, that's the old people Tai Chi. You do martial Tai Chi, it's got body conditioning. Feeding crane, Shihekwan, which I train in, that has an overall body conditioning. So sometimes I actually do that one in Isshin-Ryu because it's not just the forearms, it's the legs,
Right.
it's a lot of stuff. Right?
Ashikitai, all of
Yeah.
it.
So it's, yeah. So, I think all this stuff's important. And I think, and again, I'm sure you're teaching all this stuff in your school. I'm teaching all this stuff in my school. But I think a lot of modern Isshin-Ryu dojos fail because they don't have a vast curriculum.
I think part of it is many people have gotten focused on the sport aspect.
Yeah.
And like you said, nothing wrong with the sport aspect. Every aspect of karate has its purpose.
Right.
The sport aspect, the show aspect, the traditional aspect. And what I was really looking to do was highlight the traditional aspect, and all the pieces matter. Like you said, the Koteki Tai, Kihan, Kata, Bunkai, Embasin, the Kobudo, the conditioning,
Right.
all of it together, the Kamite, all of it together is what makes a whole karate person. If you leave pieces out, I mean, the Koteki Tai, and you have trained with Sensei Advincula, and his arms are like concrete, and you realize arms like concrete is gives you a huge advantage in combat.
Well,
And walking in.
one of the things I say is like, I don't necessarily think that the purpose of Katekkai is to strengthen your arm so when you block, you hurt the opponent's arm. I think the purpose of these body conditioning things is to increase bone density. You're hitting the
Absolutely.
arm and the bone will, the body, it's called Wolff's Law. The body says, oh my God, we're getting that part smashed. We better make that part of the body strong. And the body increases the bone density. And I've had some of my female students throughout the years go and get their bone density test because obviously as women get older, that becomes an issue with them. One of them was
Yeah.
pushing 60 and she walks in and says, hey, Sensei, I had my bone density test. My doctor said I have the bones of a teenager. And I said, well, that's
Mhm.
because of the body conditioning. She did feeding crane,
Yep.
she did Isshin-Ryu. And I said, so I think like we get kind of like Americans, like, and I think a lot of first generation guys misunderstood that. Like they thought, oh, you're doing this slamming of each other to make your block hard. When you block a punch, you hurt his arm. I don't think that because that's not the reason the Chinese talk about it.
But building that bone density makes your arm hard.
Well, right, right. And again, that bone density, the bones being strong makes you healthier. I mean, it
Yeah.
makes your body stronger. If your body's stronger, you're healthier. And this is why, like, I went to India. So we're talking about Katekkai. So let's talk about Katekkai. I go to India, I do a 3-city tour. Okay. Um, okay, we're gonna do Katekkai. They look at me like I have 6 heads, right? So I go out and a couple of these guys are big guys, and a couple of them are claiming, fourth dan, fifth dan. We start doing Katekkai and I start laying in on them, right? And then I put my arm out. I said, okay, hit me. And the guy's not hitting me. I said, no, no, you've got to try to break my arm. And I said, if you break my arm, I'll promote you, right? That's my standard joke. You break my arm, I'll promote you, right? And they were cringing. I wasn't even hitting them as hard as I could. And they were cringing. And I looked at them and I said, okay, you've never done this? And they go, no. And I said, okay, you need to understand, like, you need to do this. Like, this is an important part of conditioning your body. Like, let's take all the fighting out of it. Let's throw it in the garbage. The goal is to have a very strong, powerful body, right? So that when we're 86, we're still have a very strong, powerful body. Not that
Yep.
we're, in ill health and not able to do anything anymore. Um, so it's
And if you
interesting.
ask most Okinawans, I'm sorry to interrupt. If you
No, no,
ask
no,
most
no.
Okinawans, what's the purpose of training? They say health and longevity.
Yeah,
That's why we train for health and longevity. Yes, we train for self-defense. Yes, we
right,
train for other reasons. But almost every one of them will say primary purpose for training martial arts or karate, health and longevity.
well,
And 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 you see all these guys over there into their 70s, 80s, and even older, still doing kata, still
right.
doing, they adjust and modify. And that's one
Of,
of the things my teacher says all the time. We adjust and modify, but we don't have to stop. We
no.
we just adjust what we're doing. And you see so many of these guys in their 70s and 80s over there still teaching and training.
So it's an interesting thing you just brought up, and this has come up on other podcasts and when I've discussed with other senior teachers, this idea of adjusting the training as you get older. So I'm 61, right? I've got one bad knee, born with it. So it's not from karate. My kneecap, I was born, it sits on a weird angle. Because of the way it moves, it's created inflammation. I'm still doing double jump kicks. I can still do all jump spinning. I can still do all the crap. I can't do it like I did when I was 25, but I can still do it. But I always wondered with some of the early pioneers of karate, as they got older, we saw a lot of them put on a lot of weight. And we saw that a lot of them didn't really train anymore. They taught, they maybe counted, but they weren't really training anymore. And the standard joke in my dojo was my students would always say, well, Sensei, you'll never make eighth dan. You're not fat enough. That was one of the standard jokes in the New York school, right? So, one of the things was when I went to, I asked Master Shimabuku about that. And I said, Sensei, what about a woman that does karate? He says it's different. My first instructor said a woman has to be as strong as a man. Okay, the statement's ludicrous because not every man is as strong as every other man. Okay,
Right.
right. So Master Shimabuku
It's
says, no, it's different. He goes, a woman's different. He goes, a child's different. An older person's different. You have to adjust the training based upon the individual. Okay. I go to Fukuoka to study jujitsu. The headmaster in jujitsu of an art that goes back to 1650. I said, what if an older guy comes in? How am I teaching him falls? He goes, oh, you teach him old man falls. I was like, old man falls? What are old man falls? And then he shows me old man falls. Now that I'm 61, guess what I'm doing? I'm doing old man falls, right?
Adjusted
So,
falls. Yeah. We'll
right.
call them
So,
adjusted. How about adjusted?
right. So I think like when we talk about this, and this is something that I think is a problem. I think those early guys, a lot of them were military guys, and they were in their teens and 20s when they were training like maniacs in Okinawa,
Mhm.
and they came back and they never went back. And they kept training that same way, and they thought that's the only way to train. Oh, you don't adjust
Mhm.
anything. You keep doing that hard, crazy training, and then their bodies started to break down. And they
Yep.
didn't know, well, okay, I guess I just can't train anymore. Instead of realizing that no, you have to adjust. Like for instance, I was just going over Kusanku with one of my students. He's 70, right? And we're dropping down to one knee. But I said to him, I said, listen, if I'm having a bad knee day, I don't drop down to one knee. I do all those techniques
Mhm.
standing. And he goes, you can do that?
Mhm.
And I go, why not? Why can't I do that? I said, why am I gonna, if my knees flared up, why am I gonna aggravate it more by dropping down, right? And
Right.
so that's one of the things I think is important that I think a lot of the early pioneers lost out on. They lost out on understanding that as you got older, you had to change the way you train. You have to modify it, that there's stages you go through, you know? Um, I like you look at Angi Wezu, he had that massive stroke and he was told he'd never walk and he'd never use his left hand. And again, I spent a lot of time with him and you know, he wasn't the same Spitfire Angi he was before the stroke, but post stroke, he was still using his hand and kicking and doing everything. And again, but he had to modify it because of
Yep.
what his body could not do anymore. And look, I know, I'm sure you know the story with Advincula. Advincula has a benign tremor. And
Yes.
okay, right, you remember the story,
Once he
right?
gets warmed up, you never know it.
Right. But he came into New York and he's doing a seminar and he's telling a story. He goes, so I do Seisan and I do this. And I go here and my hand is doing this. And he goes, so I go to the school and I do Seisan. The next year I come back and I'm watching them do Seisan and they're doing this. Okay. And they get to this and they're doing this. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What what are you guys doing? They go, well, Sensei, that's how you did it last year. You did this and you did this. He goes, I have a benign tremor. Did I do it with this hand? I got a problem with this hand, which for me, I thought is excellent because again, do what I say, not what I do.
Right.
Right.
It's
Maybe,
well, it's also a little bit of you know, follow me, but then think and understand. Don't just mimic.
right,
Don't just
right.
mimic.
Which I,
And
which
a
I,
lot of people, that's how most people learn. Most people learn by mimicking. And then
right.
as we progress, we understand. And like you said, a woman versus a child versus an older person.
Yeah.
Then after we understand, then we have to make it work for our body.
Yeah.
Ki and Chotoku and Motobu Choki were two very different body
Oh,
styles.
100%.
Motobu Choki was stocky and he could be in your face, and Ki and Chotoku had to be quick and use Tai Sabaki to get out of the way. So they would emphasize what's different based on their body and what their strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's the path we all have to find at some point, is the right path for us at each point in our life.
Yeah.
And for me, like I was in my 20s, I'm a conditioning maniac. I'm a long distance runner. I
Right.
like to lift weights. I like hit the Maki war and knuckle push-ups, all this stuff. I love to condition. I love being in outstanding shape. But at 57, I can't do what I did at 47 or 30.
No.
Every decade seems to be a little different.
Right.
And I use the example to say in baseball, when a power pitcher would hit 40, overnight he'd lose 5 miles an hour on his
Right.
fastball. I used to say, when I was younger, I used to say, that's impossible. It's got to be a gradual thing. And then I
Yeah.
turned 40 and I said,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
You got
Yeah.
to adjust. You've got to adjust what you're doing so it makes sense for wherever you are based on your body type, your age, and your injuries.
So one of the other things Kichiro Shimabuku told me in 91 when I first went there, he says the dojo will go as the sensei goes. And he told me, he goes, if you get fat and don't train, then the dojo will get fat and people won't train. If you only talk about karate and don't train karate, then the people will leave because they get bored. And he says, you have to lead by example. And I knew he was talking about my first instructor without naming him by name, but it was still good for me to hear. And I've tried to live my life like that. Like, like the teenagers here get all bent out of shape because they can't do as many push-ups as I do. They can't do a jump spinning back kick on the heavy bag yet, right? And they're like, I know they're looking at me going, okay, this guy's older than my grandfather, right? And why is he still doing this? And I said, well, because I train, right? And yeah, there's certain things I know I don't do as well as I used to, and I freely admit it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I think you have to kind of understand that. One thing I wanted to mention was when we talked about the importance of health. Tai Chi has the same philosophy, real Tai Chi. Um, Real Tai Chi says if you do Tai Chi properly and correctly, you get martial skill and you get high health benefit. And if you do Tai Chi wrong, which is most of what you see in the park, that's just not real Tai Chi, then it's the same health benefit as going for a walk. But the health benefit they're talking about is can your body still generate power as you get older? That's one of the benchmarks. And again, I think if you can still generate power, like I remember watching Shoshin Nagamine, he was I think 90 when in 1997 when I led the demonstration for Master Shimbuku's dojo in Okinawa at the grand opening of the Budokan. Nagamine Sensei demonstrated, and I think he was 90. And you could still see there was kime. Now, did it look like a 25-year-old's kime? No. But then you got to take a step back and say to yourself, okay, how many 90-year-olds you think are up there and actually picking up their leg and throwing a kick? And this guy's 90 and he's still picking up his leg and throwing a kick. And there's a little something on it. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
that's my
At
goal
90.
now. And that's my goal
Yeah.
now. Now, can I get there? I don't know, but I'm going to try. I'm going to do everything in my power to try. So one of the other things I want to bring up about the book, which made me very happy, by the way, you include in the book the whatchamacallits, the things that are at the Kaikon, the plaques at the Kaikon.
Yes.
Where is that in the beginning of the book?
Let's see.
Oh yeah,
It's
here it is.
closer
I
to
found it. I found it. Here it
right
is.
after the teachers.
Okay.
Yep.
Here we go. Okay. Okay.
What
So
page on?
Masters plaques, the Okinawan Karate Kaikon. So what you have is you have all obviously Tatsuo Shimabuku, and you have Miyagi Sensei, Kion Sensei, Motobu Sensei, and Taira Sensei, right? And you have what's on their plaques.
Yep.
And the Isshin-Ryu one is fascinating because this has been a bone of contention lately.
I know it
And
has.
it started,
I
it
know it has.
started, it started with one of my podcasts, right?
Okay.
I had Andreas Quast on and we were talking about things. And I'm like you, I love the history, right? But I don't consider myself a real historian. Like me, I'm like the armchair guy. So I want guys like Andreas Quast and Advincula and Joe Swift and even Andy Sloan and Yannick Schultz and now it's Motobu Naoki, all these guys that are doing real serious research. Like I'm like, okay, good. You guys do all the work and then I can sit back and read it, right? So, we were talking about Isshin-Ryu and Tatsuo with Andreas, and Andreas mentioned something, and then what happened was I think I talked with Andy Sloan then. I interviewed Andy, and then Andreas heard that interview, and the same subject came up, and me and Andy were kind of, I think, sparring a little bit, right? And Andreas got mad. He said to me, he says, Mike, he sends me a message. He goes, because I knew I had that somewhere in a book. So he says, I found it. I found it, right? So there's like two books that were written, right, years ago in Okinawa. One's the Okinawan Karate Encyclopedia, Karate and Kobudo. And it's written like whenever it was written in the 80s, 90s. But again, you got to realize the guys that were writing this were old guys. They had been around, going back 60 years. They had spoken to a lot of these different people. So in that one book, it mentions that Tatsuo trained with Miyagi first, which it says on the plaque, in
Right.
the 20s, right? And then Miyagi introduced him to Kion. Now we know for a fact that all these guys were hanging out together. Miyagi, Kian, Motobu,
Pictures of them,
Hanashiro.
that historical picture from
Yeah,
1938. They're all
right,
sitting there.
right. You know, I've heard that it's possible at one point Kian did practice some Sanshin. And you say, oh,
Mhm.
no, no, that's Shorin. He would never do. Come on, stop. Right. All
They
these
all
guys,
learn from each
they were
other.
all doing stuff. Like, this is my problem right now with karate. Another problem. It's become Coke and Pepsi.
Mhm.
It's become Coke and Pepsi. Okay. No, Isshin-Ryu? No. They do that vertical fist punch. No, we do the twist punch. That's the real karate. Oh, no, no. You do the twist punch? No, no. The vertical punch is superior. Ugh, right? Coke and Pepsi. Let's argue about nonsense. Both punches will equally kill you if you do them right, right? But I saw that was placed on the plaque, and I was like, oh, wow, right? Because one of the things Andreas Quast raised was that he believes that the version of Seiyuchin we're doing is the version that Miyagi taught Tatsuo in the 20s, that he hadn't settled on a final version of the kata, like he was still creating his system. So, of course, people go, no, no, Tatsuo changed the kata. No, no, he changed it, right? Okay, but I do Mariyoshi Kobudo. So you can go on my channel right now and you can watch Kimo Wall Sensei, who trained with Mariyoshi Sensei in the 60s, do the Kamakata. And then you can watch my teacher, Gakiya Sensei, do the Kamakata. Two completely different kata. They're both correct. That was the Kamakata that Mariyoshi was teaching in the 60s, but he
Mhm.
changed it, right? I'm sure if we had a time capsule and we saw Kotaro Iha do certain kata 40 years ago, and then we saw him do them now, and there'd be a little bit difference in the move. And we'd say, hey, Sensei, I saw this video of you from 50 years ago, and you did that move like this, and now you're doing it like this. He'd probably say one of two things. He'd go, really? I'm doing it like I used to do it like that. Or he'd say, yeah, I used to do it like that. And I realized that's not the best way to do it. So now I do it like this, right? So my thing is then we have Tatsuo doing Sanshin kata, the Sanshin kata we do.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is pretty much verbatim what the Goju guys do. We don't do the turning around one. We do the
Mhm. Right.
back and forth one.
Stepping back.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Later.
you know why supposedly that is?
Yes. Well, because
Miyagi.
Miyagi Sensei wanted students to learn how to step backwards. When I walk up to talk to you, I walk up facing you. So it's very natural and comfortable. And
Right.
it's what we do as people.
Right.
We don't normally walk backwards. And he wanted students to be able to
Well,
step backwards.
a senior Goju sensei told me that after the war, Miyagi's health started to fade and he would sit on a chair. The
Mhm.
students didn't want to turn their back on him.
Oh,
That's why they did the back and forth. To me, that makes more sense. Right.
yeah.
But so, so how come Tatsuo didn't change the Sanshin? If he supposedly changed every other kata, why do we do the Sanshin exactly the way they do it? Why didn't he change it? But he changed Seiyuchin. But he changed this, he changed that. And obviously some things he did change. But my
Yeah.
point is, I think Andres Quas' argument that the Seiyuchin were doing is the version that Miyagi was teaching at that time, right? I think that makes as much sense as anything else, you know?
Yeah. That's unfortunately all we can do. We can't go back and have conversations with
No,
Master Shimabuku anymore.
no.
All we can do is speculate, research. Why does he start Naihanchi going in the other direction than Shorin people do? We can only speculate as to why
Well,
these things happen unless he told someone with certainty and they passed it down. Most of it is speculation.
so the Nahanshi thing we do have an answer for. So the answer is the
Mhm.
Tamarate version goes to the left,
Okay.
just like we do. And also Motoburu, they practice it both ways.
Mhm.
So you can watch the current headmaster of Motoburu do it starting going to the right, and you can see him do it just like us starting to the left.
Master Shimabuku just picked the way he liked better.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
again, we don't know why he did it, right? But maybe the one day he went through Nahanshi with Motobu stepped to the left, and he says, "Oh, okay, I'll do it like that." Because I mean, we don't know. And again, to me, it doesn't matter. This is just stuff for martial arts nerds like us to talk about and come up with an idea. My problem starts with when the nitpicking and knocking starts. Well, those Isshin-Ryu guys, they don't know Nahanshi. They go to the left. Everybody else goes to the right. Okay, like it matters. It matters, you know. Same thing, like in Isshin-Ryu, we do more open hand techniques than they do. You know, Tatsuo does the open hand technique when we come across. But on one of the
Yeah.
videos I have, he does the punch because again, he did it long time with the punch. So sometimes he laps back in. On some of the
This
video
is
I have
probably
him,
what he and Multiple both did, and then he
yeah,
decided this for some
yeah,
reason.
you know, yeah.
And again, speculation. We don't know why did he open the hand. My opinion on that is most Americans don't condition our fingers like the old Okinawans did with
Right,
buckets of sand,
right.
beans, and all this,
Yeah, and
and finger push-ups. So having strong hands, that technique, Nukite technique is great.
yeah.
Me, given the choice, unless I'm going to a soft target, I'd much rather punch somebody and hit them hard with that than
Yeah.
this.
So I've used Nukate in combat numerous times. Okay. So police officer, I was in a lot of real fights. Okay.
Mhm.
And the only place you should ever use Nukate is to the throat or the eyes.
Yeah.
If you think, and look, I see these Uichiru guys that are breaking boards with Nukate, and then you look at their fingers and they're all deformed. Not interested. I'm not interested. I'm not deforming my body so I can impress people by breaking two boards with Nikite. When I'm telling you, I've hit numerous people in the throat. And again, have I conditioned my hands a little bit? Of course I have. But have I conditioned my hands to the point where my hands are deformed? No. And every time I hit a guy in the throat with Nikite, guess where he went? He went down, right?
Because you
So
were the appropriate target for what you could, how you
yeah,
condition your hand.
right. That's what I'm saying. Like, so people say to me, the one in the kata and the kihon, why do we do the nukite to the solar plexus or straight out? Because most of the stuff we do is to the middle. Almost everything is the mid range, right? You know, again, that's just so your body mechanics, your alignment's right. But in combat, the guy might be taller than you, might be shorter than you. You're gonna have to go up. You're gonna have to go down, right? So, so yeah, so that the thing with the plaque was fascinating to me. You know, that they actually put that on the plaque that he trained with Miyagi first.
The
y-
research folks at the Kaikon believe that he trained with Miyagi first at the Naha Commercial School, and he also trained, I believe, with Miyagi after Kian too as well, and probably for a longer period of time. So you could argue, he was with Kian for a longer period of time, even if he was with Miyagi first and then Miyagi again later. When people have a teacher, you might go back and train. He might have went back and seen Kian over the years and trained a little here and there too. We don't know.
so
It
I
wasn't
asked
like he
I asked
started this date, quit this date, never saw him again.
so I asked Tokamura. I asked Tokamura out of the Vinkless. I said to Tokamura Sensei, I said, Sensei, how often did Tatsuo Sensei train with Miyagi Sensei? He said to me, he says, my understanding is Miyagi Sensei, not after the war. After the war, he was in a camp. So he was fairly close to Tatsuo. So we're pretty sure that's where maybe he picked up Sanshin.
Mhm.
But also, Tokamura just said, again, to me, common sense. He said, well, Keon lived very close. You could walk to Keon's house. He could walk to Keon's house. Miyagi was in Naha, right?
Right.
Or wherever he was. So he's farther away. It took longer to get there. Like again, no like obscure reason. Okay, it was more convenient. Keon was closer, right?
Yeah.
Um, and like Sherman Harold pointed something out that, some of the sections in Sun Tzu correspond with some of the Kumite fighting drills from Motobu Sensei.
Yeah.
They're very close. So it makes you wonder, did Tatsuo just decide to put it, like there's some other kata that are in Sun Tzu that he had learned at one point and decided not to practice. But it's just fascinating. Yeah. It's interesting when you take a deeper dive into the style, just the way Shimabuku thought, like his mind and
I
everything.
think he was a genius. I
Oh, he
really
was a
do.
genius. He was a
I think
genius.
he picked 8 kata, and he didn't take all the kata he learned in the other
Right.
systems. And Sun Tzu almost became, I'll call the catch-all for some of the techniques he liked in the other kata, but didn't like enough to bring the whole kata in. The double punch, different things that were in there that he really liked, but didn't. He just felt what he wanted to keep the kata to a small number, and the fact that he's got Naihanchi and Sanshin in there, he's representing the purest foundation kata of
Right.
Goju and Shorin.
Right.
And if you can understand those two kata, in my opinion, and I've participated in discussions on Facebook all the time. People say, "What's the toughest Isshin-Ryu kata?" They're all difficult, and
Right.
they're all advanced kata when you dig in. In my opinion, Sanshin and Nahanchi are the toughest because you're going to the extremes of Gamaku and and
Well,
Jinkuchi.
the the difficulty with Nahanshi is most people can't do it and generate power.
Yeah,
So they
right.
can do the kata, they can look nice, but they can't generate the power. It's a hard kata to generate speed and power. San Shin is a whole different kettle of fish. Like my standard joke is, once a year I do San Shin and I go, oh, that was a good one. Like that one was good. Okay. And then the rest the next year, I try doing it good again. And then another year later, I'm usually by myself in the dojo. No one's around, and I do a sanshin. I'm like, oh, that was a good. That one was good. That was good. And now I struggle again for another year to try to do it because it's so multi-level. Now I don't agree with some of the way people are doing sanshin, and you can watch my sanshin videos and you can see if you agree with them or not. But I don't believe in tension. I don't believe that that's because again, I studied a lot of Chinese arts, and that's one of the things Walter Van Gilson complimented me on. He came to one of my seminars, believe it or not, Walter Van Gilson, which talk about shock. I'm doing a seminar in Pennsylvania, and one of my guys comes over to me and goes, Sensei, I think Walter Van Gilson's here. And I'm like, no, why would he be here? And I look up and there he is waving at me. And I walk over, I said, Sensei, what's going on? He says, well, you're giving a seminar, right? I says, yeah, but why are you here? He says, well, I came for the seminar. I said, yeah, but you're Walter Van Gilson. Why are you coming to my seminar? He says, because I want to see what you're teaching. I know you're doing a lot of stuff based on things you're learning in China from these Chinese arts, and I think that's important. And at the end of the seminar, he came up to me. He says, Mike, a lot of the stuff you're doing, I really think is great. He goes, and I think you're doing what some of us should have done that we never did. We never looked at the Chinese side of it. And he goes, I think that's important. And I think that's a problem now with Okinawan karate. I think there's, a couple of guys have said to me that in Okinawan karate now, you're seeing karate went to Japan and they changed it. And now they're kind of bringing that change back into Okinawa. Like some of the Okinawan karate starting to look like the Japanese karate. And they're
Yeah,
losing some of that original Chinese influence. So for me, I'm trying to bring that Chinese influence back in, and I'm not changing the kata, but I'm changing how I move. I'm changing like San
yeah,
Shin. My whole philosophy in San Shin is trained, and here's why it has. I went through San Shin with Advincula, Sherman Harrell. I went through San Shin with a senior sensei in Goju-Ryu, who studied with. He was Toguchi Sensei's representative here, so guy's got a tremendous resume. He helped change my mind on Sanshin. And then studying the Chinese arts, that changed it again. Um, so I think some of the things that people say you get from training in Sanshin, my problem is I haven't seen anybody get those things from Sanshin. So my question is, well, why? Well, it's got to be we're not doing it right, right? So like I recently started a series on San Shin, so I put up part 1 and 2 so far. I haven't done part 3, and who knows, maybe there'll be a part 4 and part 5, depending on what's going on in my head, right? But I've had a lot of people reach out for me after the first one and privately send me messages and say that's the best explanation of Sanshin they've ever seen. Now, I'm not claiming that it's from me because it's not. It's from a group of teachers that I was able to glean things from. Some Westerners that were serious, senior Goju sensei, some Isshin-Ryu sensei, some Chinese teachers that I realized, okay, that this should be in here. It's not here. Why isn't it here? Right. And the knock on Okinawa is that people that do Sanshin die young.
right.
You know,
Which which isn't really true.
well, it's not 100% true, but have you ever seen the book Karate Shortens Your Lifespan?
I have not seen that book.
Okay.
No.
Well, it's written by two doctors, and it's a good book. Karate guys should read it because
Yeah.
first off, if you're an Isshin-Ryu guy, you read the book, and when you finish, you go, "Thank God I do Isshin-Ryu," because they talk about all the movements and the type of training you do that causes inflammation.
A lot of the extreme like the Uichiru stuff where they're like the fanatics of body
Yeah. Yeah.
conditioning.
And even the deep stances these guys talk about, you got to be careful with how you do them. They have a whole chapter on Sanshin. And what they have in
Mhm.
the book is they have charts. They have longevity charts. And they have senior karate masters, not just from Okinawa and Japan, but also the West. The age they died and the average age of the general population when they were dying. And for a lot of karate masters, they're dying younger than the average population. So,
Interesting. Yeah, I'd
yes.
have to look at the book and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
information.
So
I'm
so the
not familiar.
thing, yeah, so the thing is yeah, well, most karate guys don't want to read it, right?
Right. No, I love to read.
Yeah. No,
That's
no, but I'm
my
saying,
goddamn library back there.
yeah, no, no. I'm saying because you read it, it makes you nervous. You're like, oh, shit, am I doing one of the
Yeah.
styles that will make me die younger? And me and McCarthy Sensei discussed this. He goes, karate's supposed to be so holistic, but why do a lot of karate guys get knee replacement and hip replacement and different things? Well, it's because obviously there's something they're not doing right. Like I discussed this with a senior Shotokan sensei. I said, when are a bunch of ninth dans in Shotokan that have all had knee or hip replacement, when is somebody going to raise their hand and say, hey, all of us wind up getting our joints replaced? Why is that? Like, are we doing something wrong? Like, should we look at what we're doing and maybe make some changes? Like, I think for us, Tatsuo made those changes. I mean,
Yeah, I think part of it is overtraining or bad body mechanics can
right,
definitely lead to those
right,
things. I've been running. I've got 50,000 miles on my legs. I've been
right,
running since I was 18, and I've been doing martial arts now for, I'll take away that when I was a kid, but from
right,
1990 till so 35 years, and I
right.
train hard. And I've got a few, just because of age and a little
Wear,
overtraining
yeah,
injuries,
wear and
but
tear.
right. But I think
Yeah,
if you train smart and you listen to your body, and make those adjustments as you age, I think we can stay healthy until later years. Now, everybody's different.
right,
Some people just blessed with good knees or good back or
right,
good
right.
whatever. My shoulders are what's starting to now, just because hitting makiwara, swinging an nunchaku, knuckle push-ups. I'm overusing them. But I think generally speaking, if we are smart about how we train, we should be able to be doing what Sensei Vincula's doing at
Yeah,
86. Not
I,
everybody, but we
I
should be able to do, train.
yeah, I totally agree. I mean, my thing is you have a lot of karate guys that, well, my teacher said to do it exactly like this, so we have to do it like this. Okay, but if your teacher was wrong and the angle you're kicking at is causing you to get a hip replacement, well, then maybe you got to take a step back and maybe you have to now correct the teacher. And I'm not saying you correct him, but you correct yourself. You say, okay, well, that thing he taught me, maybe he wasn't 100% correct on. And one of the things I say all the time, whether I'm doing a seminar or whether I'm teaching, in dojo, I say, look, there's probably some things I'm teaching you wrong. And hopefully you young guys throughout the years one day wake up and say, hey, that thing Sensei Calandra taught us all those years ago? Yeah, I've been doing that. I don't think it's right. I think it should be done like this. And maybe everybody in the room goes, holy crap, you're right. That makes more sense. And wherever I'm looking down upon from, and I go, wow, finally, okay, good. He figured that out. That's good that he fixed that thing I screwed up on. But I think a lot of times we don't see that. We see, oh no, my teacher said it's like this. It has to be like that. And, I'll tell you something funny. I've been in a room with two first generation guys where they were arguing about a bunkai.
Mhm.
Oh no, Tatsuo told me it was this. Tatsuo told me it was this. And I had to say to them, I said, well, you went up to him and because they told how they did the bunkai. They went up to Shimbuku Sensei and they said, Sensei, could I show you what I think this move is in the kata? And they demonstrate the move with one of the other students. And Tatsuo Sensei went, oh, good. And then the afternoon class, a completely different first generation guy walks up and shows the same move from the kata and does a completely different application. And Tatsuo goes, good. Now, neither of those guys were at the same class. And maybe this takes place
Mhm.
years apart. And then now
Yeah.
these two guys are in a room, and the one guy shows the application. And he goes, Tatsuo told me this was the application. And then the other guy goes, no, no, oh, time out. No, no. He told me this is the application. When meanwhile, they're both right. Because that's the other
Yeah.
thing. There is no one application for each of these moves in the kata. Because I can tell you,
Mhm.
having studied two different Chinese arts, um, fairly in depth, one for over 25 years now. Um, the Chinese show multiple fighting applications for every move.
Mhm.
And, they
And
even
and
do
I'm a
that.
fanatic of bunkai. I'm a fanatic.
Yeah.
I believe a couple of things. One is there was a language barrier.
Oh,
Master
100%.
teaching Americans, everybody might have understood a little different. He would sometimes, according to Sensei, and I've talked to Sensei Van Gilson about this and Sensei Bartasevitz, he would sometimes exaggerate the technique because he couldn't verbalize to the Americans. With the Okinawans, he could. So he would sometimes make the technique a little bigger, and then people might imitate that, or they might not understand. Or the other side of it is some of them were there in 1958, some were there in 1961, some were there in
Different.
1966.
He was teaching different.
He was evolving. He was
Yeah.
changing. Wansu, the big thing. Is it a back fist or a punch?
Right.
Yes. It depends when you were
Right.
there.
Right. Well, same
Many
thing.
other
So Don Nagel, right? The one thing I'll give Don Nagel was he never changed his kata. Like
things.
I've got him on video on the channel in the 1970s doing all the Isshin-Ryu Kata. And he still did the Ouchi in Wansu because that's the way he learned it. So he never learned the drop into the side and two straight punches. He did Ouchi, the round punches, and that's the way he did Wansu. He never changed it. Nagel said that Tatsuo showed him a head block in Seisan to open it and then a straight punch. Nagel also said Tatsuo would block with his forearm and this would come over and he'd slam either the back of your wrist or that point in the forearm and strike you with that. So now Adler, Sensei Adler, met Tatsuo. Tatsuo came to the East Coast. And Adler, he goes, Mike, I was a brown belt. He says, here's what I remember about Tatsuo. I held the door open for him with my arm like that, and he was so short, he just walked right under my arm. Right.
Yeah.
And
He was like
then,
4'10", right?
yeah. And then
Yeah.
Adler goes, but here's the one thing he did to me that I'll never forget. He did the middle block and he hit me with a back knuckle strike that my arm went numb. And then he kind of giggled. He said like Tatsuo giggled, right? And he said Tatsuo Sensei said to him again, like do it again. And Sensei Adler says, no, 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 Sensei, like that,
Good enough.
like it was that dramatic. So again,
Yeah.
you say to yourself, I haven't heard where the other first generation guys talk about that kind of technique, but Nagel swore it, and Adler says, yeah, that's what he did. He did it to me. I felt it. Okay, so the way I look at it is, don't say Nagel's wrong. Like you said, he was there early. Maybe Tatsuo, for some reason, was emphasizing that technique at the time. You know, um, so I find it fascinating the way that the kata have changed throughout Tatsuo's teaching. So for me in my dojo, you may see one of my black belts in Wansu doing Ouchi. You may see another one doing the straight punches. You'll only see the Q students doing straight punches. I have a very set way I teach the Qs. After black belt, I start showing them variations. Oh, you could do the kata like this. Or you could do this like this. Well, Sensei, where's this from? Well, Tatsuo taught it like this at one point. So rather than make the kata kind of a dead thing, I try to make it a living thing where I show you
Yeah.
variations. So let's practice it with these variations in it. And I just find it makes the training a little more interesting. It's not
Yeah,
only
it
the
makes it
same
interesting
way
and it
every
makes you
single
think.
time. Yeah, it forces you to
Yeah, it
think.
makes you think.
Exactly. You
With the
know?
bunkai, I teach a specific bunkai to every kata in my dojo. 98% of how my teacher taught me, and he said that's the basic bunkai that Tatsu Shimabuku showed
Right.
him. And we teach variations. Oil
Right.
bunkai. This is my
Right.
bunkai. This is me experimenting.
Right.
And when I go to Okinawa, I always try to go see Uichi Sensei and take a class with him. Um, and he does the katas a little different, the kihan a little different. And I always ask him about the bunkai when he sees his
Right.
techniques a little different. When I've learned from Sensei Advincula or someone else, I always say, Sensei, can you show me the bunkai? So the big joke with him now is, boy, you ask a lot of questions about bunkai. But
Well,
I want to see it. I want to see interpretation. And sometimes he'll say my bunkai, Oyo, and he'll show
right.
me what his interpretation
Right.
is. And
Well,
I love because it makes you think different.
right. The issue is that there's not an Okinawan karate master that's had a real fight in probably 70 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, this is called the martial truth, not the martial wannabe truth or the martial. No, the reality is, when's the last time an Okinawan karate master had to use his karate to save his life or the life of somebody else? Um, Okinawa is extremely safe. Okay. I also do Japanese martial arts. I've been to the Japanese Tokyo Metropolitan Police headquarters. I asked their senior tactics instructors. They're empty hand fighting instructors. How often do you face someone armed with a gun? Virtually never. That was their response. I was with another police officer who was traveling with me. We looked at each other and said, can you imagine if we went out to work every night knowing that we'd never face a guy armed with a gun? How much different your mindset would be as a police officer.
Yeah.
In New York, when I was a cop, it was when New York was at its worst. You assumed everybody had a gun. You assumed everybody had a weapon. If you didn't do that, you were putting yourself in peril, right? So then I asked them about facing a guy armed with a blade, and they said virtually never. And okay, right? So again, I know they created these martial arts, and I know these martial arts all come out of real fighting, right? But the modern instructors have not had to prove themselves.
Haven't had to test it.
Yeah. And again, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because I think if that's the way their society is, I say great. But, the Okinawan and Japanese, it's very like this. It's a closed society, right? You don't have a lot of outsiders that live there. There's not a lot of outside influence. Their culture is very, very ingrained, right? Where in the West, that's not the case. We have a lot more freedom, freedom of thought, freedom of expression. So in that kind of society, you're going to have more crime. That's just the way it goes. You're living in New Jersey. I mean, again, I'm sure if you're
We don't have
going
any
into
crime here. We don't have any crime here.
I'm sure if you're going to certain areas, you're paying a lot more attention, right?
I used to work for the utility. I used to work for
Oh,
PSE&G.
okay.
And my territory was Newark, Jersey City, Kearney, Irvington. So you get it.
Yeah, I know exactly. I used to work in Kearney. Years ago, I worked in Kearney at a warehouse, right? So I know exactly what you're talking about, right? But so that's the one thing that I think in the West, there's more of an emphasis on the self-defense aspect now. Like, I'll be honest with you, when I see a lot of the Okinawans doing fighting bunkai, I don't take it serious. Again, if I wasn't in the amount of actual fights I was in, okay, maybe I'd buy that stuff, but a lot of it I'm not buying. Um, like I was at a seminar with a 10th Dan from Isshin-Ryu from Okinawa, and he was asked to demonstrate an application for the last move of Nahanchi. And there was 100 people in a room, and when he demonstrated the application, people started like this, like making faces like that would never work. And I think he realized it, and he showed a second application, which was slightly better than the first, but not much better. And again, my thing is I just like to see them, and you can pressure test in the dojo a little bit. I mean, you have a guy throw a punch at you the way a criminal throws a punch, and you say, okay, well, how can I use these moves from the kata? And how can I adapt them and modify them and use them in a fight where they work? And that's one of the things I just don't see going on in Okinawa. Everything's from a karate punch. Everything they do is against a karate punch. So I've been in hundreds of life and death encounters, Scott. Tell me how many times someone threw a karate punch at me.
Probably zero.
Tell me how many
Maybe one.
times, tell me how many times someone threw a kick at me. Any type of kick.
Probably very few.
One that I remember. One night we're talking about in the dojo, and I asked the other cops that trained that had been in a lot of action. I said, how many times a guy throw a kick at you? They literally had to stop and think. And the one guy goes, I don't. Then they look at each other, they go, I don't think a guy ever threw a kick at me. Right.
I would
So
imagine
again,
it was a lot of punches or grabs.
it's sucker punches, it's certain attacks. And look, I work against, like, that's one of the things we'll talk about you having the kumite techniques in the book, which again, I think it's worth buying the book just for that. Just so people see, oh, wait a second, there's joint locks in Isshin-Ryu. Oh, wait a second, there's ground fighting in Isshin-Ryu. Like, I remember one year, and you'll find this funny. Kichiro Shimabuku comes in. It's the World Championships. So he teaches a seminar. So I go, Sensei, what are you teaching this year? He goes, oh, I'm going to teach some self-defense. I was like, oh, okay. He says, so Van Gilson shows up. I think it was in Jersey. So Wolf Van Gilson's there. Okay. So my wife's training in karate at the time. She just happens to pair off with one of Van Gilson's guys. And Kichiro Shimabuku is showing joint locks. There's 100 people in a room. This is what you're seeing. Like, people are looking at each other. Most of them had never done a joint lock in their life. So the guy that's training with my wife goes, "Do you do these in the dojo?" And my wife goes, "Oh yeah, we do these all the time." He goes, "Yeah, us too." And that's another thing. Like again, like most modern Isshin-Ryu schools, a lot of them are not spending a lot of time on the joint locks. And I can tell you, listen, doing the joint locks on a resisting opponent is very difficult. But I can also tell you, I've done them a lot. Those are the techniques I use the most. Again, as law enforcement, they don't want me to kill the criminal. They want me to
Right.
control the criminal. That's
As
a
law
lot hard.
enforcement, you have very strict rules what you can and can't do, which
Right.
puts you at a disadvantage against the guy that you're fighting
Total
that can do anything.
disadvantage, right? And I tell the stories where the first time I tried doing some of the joint techniques for real, they didn't work. I didn't blame the technique. I blamed me. I blamed my first instructor for the way he showed me the technique. What did I do? I took a couple of hard charges in the dojo. I said, okay, you're going to have to resist on this. You're going to have to do this. I got to figure out how to do these techniques when the guy's really resisting. And sure enough, through doing them over and over again, I did. And I had a lot of Isshin-Ryu senior sensei come in my dojo and go, "Oh, those joint locks are okay, but they don't really work." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Feel free to resist any way you like." And then when I drop them with it, they're like, "Oh my God, I've never felt anybody do them like that." I go, "Right, because people haven't had to do them for real." So it changes it. But just the fact that they're in there, like, in the old Armstrong video where Tatsuo's doing a hip throw on Steve Armstrong and he's doing a joint throw on Steve Armstrong and he's doing joint locks. Okay, well, here's the headmaster doing that stuff. It's not an Isshin-Ryu. I mean, even if Inkla Sensei, he came in one time. I don't remember who was doing. I don't know if it was my dojo or someone else's was had him in, and he did the throws of Isshin-Ryu. That was one of the topics we did maybe 2 hours on it. And he showed where there's a bunch of throws in the kata, and there we do these throws, we do this throw. I remember some of the Isshin-Ryu people like wow, oh my God, like wow, you mean we have throws in Isshin-Ryu? Well, if it's a combat art, I think you got to have throws, chokes, joint locks, strikes, ground fighting. Advincula teaches all
Yeah,
that stuff. I mean,
it's, it's in
but
the Kamite.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. And the thing that people need to realize too with that Kamite, that's just the basic blueprint.
Mhm.
That's the 25 he's sending them back home with and basically telling them to expand on it. Like
Yeah,
expand on it.
they evolved. They evolved. Like
Right,
Sensei Vincula said, those were constantly evolving. He said
right,
Shimabuku Sensei would add some, he'd take some away.
right,
And he said they were doing a lot of demonstrations
right.
they do different demonstrations on Okinawa because, Tatsuo Shimabuku Sensei wanted to attract people to the dojo. So they
Of
would do
course.
kata. He'd hammer the nail through the board. They would do
Right,
some of the and Sensei said a lot of times Master Shimabuku knew I knew them, so he'd ask me to go out and demonstrate them with
right,
somebody. And he said, but the list wasn't always the same. And I put in the book, and they're
right.
hard to read. I got to get better copies. There's a few tweaks I'm going to make and make updates. The
Okay.
beauty of Amazon is since it's print on demand, I can go make updates, and 3 days later they're there. So
Right,
I've corrected a few typos already.
right.
I have a couple other little found. No matter how many times the book is proofread, you always find
Oh,
stuff.
no
You
kidding.
always find stuff.
No kidding. No kidding. Yeah.
So I want to improve a few things. There's a couple of things I want to add, but generally speaking, um, I'll do those things. But generally speaking, those Kumite techniques weren't static in time. They were so Sensei has lists from different points in time. This
Right,
was the list in a different year. And then when I tested for Renchi under Sensei Vincula, there was a certain list of techniques that Mike Whiteley, Claudia Whiteley, and I went together for Renchi testing. We
right,
had to demonstrate.
right,
We had to demonstrate all the Gihan, all the Kata, bunkai,
right.
Kobudo, Tatsu's Kamite. And that's the list I put in here was the list that I had to demonstrate for my testing. And I made sure I noted that it wasn't the only list and there's variations.
Well,
Sensei Vincula teaches
but
variations.
see, that's also
Yeah,
my thing. Like, not all the attacks are there. Like, that's not all the
right.
attacks, right? So like, for instance, like, I went to London like 6 or 7 years on the road to do Isshin-Ryu seminars. So when I go there, I'm teaching a group of teenagers. I said, "What's a common attack here?" And they go, "A headlock." And I was like, "Really?" Like, I was like, "Really?" Because again, when you're a police officer, right? The guy robs you, he grabs you. Okay, so you're taking the report, and the guy's telling you, well, the guy grabbed me from behind, or the guy,
Mhm.
grabbed me by the throat, or the guy yoked me from behind. Like there's certain ways the criminals will attack with a hold to get accomplished what they want to get accomplished, especially if they don't have a weapon, right?
Yeah.
So again, I go to these foreign countries. I'll ask them, well, what's a common attack? And the kids in London said a headlock, and I was like, oh, all right. So I showed them. There's like 20 techniques I probably showed from the headlock, right, ranging from pressure point things just to hopefully get the guy to let go to ones that you really hurt the guy, right? Um, so I just always found it fascinating. So that's why, like, I'll teach techniques. Like I'll teach a full Nelson techniques, half hammerlock technique, different things. Now, have I ever taken a police report where someone grabbed somebody in a hammerlock? No. Have I ever taken a police report where someone grabbed somebody in a full Nelson? No. Okay. But like I jokingly say in the dojo, when I teach those techniques, I said, look, chances are someone's not going to grab you in this. But now that I said that, you're going to walk in the parking lot in Walmart tomorrow and some nutball is going to try to grab you in a full Nelson. And you're going to say, he said people never attack us. And, he almost didn't show us that technique. So, so that's why I'm saying, like, I show techniques for everything, every type of attack you can think of. And again, being in law enforcement and having a lot of other law enforcement guys that train with me and are now senior teachers in my dojo, we can go to things and say, well, no, that's not how the criminal attacks. The criminal attacks like this. The criminal does this. He does that. He does this other thing. Like, I just, a guy just asked me a question based on one of my podcasts. I'm not sure which one it was, but he asked me, well, how do criminals really attack with a knife? So I explained to him how they really attack with a knife. And it's not the static way that most people work knife defense. And, it's not, criminals are not trained knife fighters. Like, if you're training come up against a guy like Dan Inosanto or Advincula, who have a vast experience in knife training, you got a problem. Like Advincula says, you got to take a cut and make the guy pay. So, and I teach that knife defense. I tell everybody, you're probably going to be cut, getting stabbed doesn't mean you're going to die. Take them out, eliminate them, because that's the other thing you learn in law enforcement. We've had guys that were stabbed where their intestines hanging out. We've had guys that were cut where this looks like a second mouth. They survived, which is something I try to bring home to martial arts people, not thinking, oh my God, you get stabbed, you die, you get shot, you die. No. If you're in the fight, you're in the fight, stay in the fight. So yeah, it's interesting. I just wish more Isshin-Ryu dojo would pay a little bit more attention to the self-defense. I hope they do get this book. I hope they do look and say, wow, Tatsuo taught ground fighting. Wow, Tatsuo taught some knife defense. Yeah, he did. I said to Joe Swift, Joe, when's the last time you saw an Okinawan karate sensei do knife defense? Never. That's what he said. He said never. I said, when's the last time you saw him do ground fighting? He says, never, Mike. I said, right, but Tatsuo taught it. I'm sure other, back then, I'm sure other Okinawan masters were teaching it, right? And again, do I want to do ground fighting like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu? No, because I don't want to roll around on the floor with a guy. If I wind up on the ground, I want to hurt him and get back up on my feet as quick as possible. None of this
Even if
rolling.
you're a good grappler, it only really works for one-on-one. If there's three friends there while you're on the ground, the other two guys are making your head into a soccer ball.
Well, I just said to the guys on the Kick Punch podcast, asked me, I said, listen, guys, this notion that fights go to the ground, the only person that goes to the ground is a loser. I said, I've been hundreds of fights. I said, okay, the guy that loses, he's the guy that's on the ground. Like in my case, the only reason I'm following him is to cuff him. But if it's like you or you're in the parking lot, you don't got to cuff the guy. You got to stop him that he's no longer a threat to you. Where is he? Well, he should wind up on the ground
Who's
at the
built to
end.
fight?
Right. Or maybe you hit him once and knock him down and he gets up and runs. We'll take that too. That's a fine thing too, right? But this idea that every fight ends up on the ground, bullshit. That's just not the case. I mean, if you brought in, I could bring in 50 cops, they'd laugh at you if they said that. What? End up on a fight? No, the criminal ends up on the ground. But yeah, I'm showing the book again. Listen, folks, I'm in my soon to be 46th year in Isshin-Ryu, which basically means I'm getting older, right? But as Isshin-Ryu books go, highly recommend. Lot of good stuff in it. Read it, look at it, again, like me, I'm sure you won't agree with everything, but that's fine. That's good. That it makes for some good discussions and debates. and it makes you maybe think, or maybe there'll be something in here where you look at and say, I didn't look at it from that point of view or something like that. Um, so I really think, Isshin-Ryu people should get the book, and check it out, you know, and I think it's well worth adding to your Isshin-Ryu library. I think Scott's done a really good job, and I appreciate you coming on. And if in the
Yeah, thank you.
future you write more books or you decide to update this one,
We'll see.
um, if you go to Okinawa and something cool happens in Okinawa, or you want to talk about that, you reach out. I'll be happy to have you on again.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do with this podcast. I'm trying to expose people to people that are doing good things in martial arts, and I think this book is really a good thing. So thanks for coming on.
Yep. I just like to, I guess close by saying I kind of see the job of our generation, not the first generation people under Tatsu Shimabuku sensei, as to talk to the first generation students as much as we can. I got the opportunity to interview John Bartasevich sensei 3 or 4 times for this book. I've talked to Sensei Walter Van Gilson when he was with us a number of times because he lived one town over from me. Obviously, I'm with Sensei Vincula all the time, learning from him. And Sensei Vincula told me, he said, there aren't that many first generation students left. If you can get an audience with them and you can talk to them, go talk to them, videotape them, ask them for the stories.
Yeah.
The stories, the dates are important.
Right.
Whether he started on March of this year or April of this year with each teacher,
Yeah. Who
it's nice to
cares?
know. The
Right.
important thing is some of the stories in here about who Tatsu Shimabuka was as a person, who
Right.
the first generation students were as
Right.
people. These are the stories that I don't want to see lost. Some of the first generation students, like Sensei Vincula, like John Bartasevich, took some photos when they could.
Right.
Sensei did interviews with using a cassette recorder because
Right.
that's what he had at the time.
Right.
We
Right.
have this beautiful thing we call a video camera on us
Right.
24.
Right.
When we're
Right.
talking to the sensei of Vincula, Van Gilson sensei's gone. The other first, whether it's Tokamura sensei, whether it's John Bartasevich sensei, Dave Zaslow sensei, any of these guys, we should be recording and capturing the stories, the history of who Shimabuku sensei was and what he wanted out of his martial arts so that we can pass it down to the next generation.
Yeah, I feel extremely blessed. I spent a significant amount of time with Vincula Sensei. I spent a significant amount of time with Harold Sensei. I spent a significant amount of time with Van Gilson Sensei. I trained with Harold Mitchum. I trained with Harry Ackland. I trained with Don Nagel. Obviously Safried, I met out there.
Great guy.
Yeah,
What a great
yeah.
guy.
And there's probably a few I'm forgetting that I met and trained with. So I was lucky in that regard that, I got to do some stuff with Harold Mitchum. I got to do some stuff with Don Nagel. I got to do some stuff with Harry Ackland. And he's different for Advincula, obviously Harold. Yeah, I mean, you can't you can't replace that, you know. I
Experience
will
they had with Master Shimabuku. None of us as second, third, fifth
right,
generation people are ever going to get that.
right.
The only way we're going to get it is by capturing the stories of the people that were with Master Shimabuku.
And I will say, and we can finish on this note too, that I also think our job is to make Isshin-Ryu as good as we can.
Absolutely.
Like if
Isshin-Ryu,
there's
obviously,
something
as we all know, is shrinking on Okinawa.
right.
It's
Well,
almost extinct
yeah,
to a certain
there's
extent.
I think there's a few reasons for that,
Yeah. And
but
that's a whole other
yeah,
conversation. But
yeah. So, but again,
but
I appreciate you coming on. I think the book is great. Buy the book, all right? And I'll let you know how my trip goes to Okinawa when I get back.
enjoy it. I'm
All
jealous.
right.
I wish I was going too.
Thanks. All right, take care.
Thank you.
So I hope you enjoyed that interview with Scott Fawcett. I had a blast. I just really enjoy talking to these different people. I'm glad he decided to write the book. Again, here's the book. Please consider getting it. It's a great book and it's not expensive. Okay, it's not expensive at all on Amazon. So highly worth it. All right. Like I said, hope you enjoyed the interview. I enjoyed talking to Scott. Look forward to talking to him in the future. Hopefully he does some more projects, which would be great. Again, click that like button. Please subscribe. Let's get past that 15,000. Consider becoming a member. All right. And I will see you after I get back from Okinawa. All right. Take care and thanks for watching.